One thing's for sure, we're all going to get a lot thinner. Welcome back, everybody. Here we are with part 2 of issue 91, and we're going to go ahead and get started. I gave you a bit of a preview from the last one. So this time we're going to be programming the Arduino. So let's go ahead and get started. So um, we have our IDE open, and um, what we need to do first is we need to make sure that we're on the right COM port, which we are. And from here, we can actually get board info. So it tells us it's an Arduino Leonardo, gives us our different information. And that just basically just helps give us confirmation that it's actually talking to it. So now what we need to do is actually install the library that we're going to use. And so we're going to open up the library manager. And what we want to do is, um, so we want to look for fast LED. And uh, there we go, fast LED. I don't know which one is which. For NeoPixel grids, I don't know which one specifically. I don't think we're doing any kind of. So NeoPixel is a whole nother thing. Um, so we're just going to go with this one for now, and we'll go from there. Let's go ahead and install it, and we went with the most current one, and we will get that installed. So that is, I believe it should be installed. It is. It says so right there. And if we come back up here, we can look through our, there's a way that we can look through the libraries. I don't remember exactly where that was, but we can look through our different libraries that we already had uh, installed. Obviously, we can go back up to manage libraries, but um, let's put our board on here. We need to look for the Leonardo. Now we have our board. Now all we have to do is get started on doing our programming. So one of the first things we need to do is identify what kind of LEDs we're working with and all of that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and get started with the setup portion. We're also going to need to make sure that we're using the fast LED library. So let's go ahead and get started with that as well. Well, we're back. So a couple things happened, and I'll just explain it to you. As I was actually doing the coding, I had another screen up or another window up. It wasn't on my screen. I think it was actually back behind this screen here. And for some reason, it was in front of everything else. And because of that, it was uh, covering up everything in the window. And unfortunately, that was a bit of a problem. So because of that, I have to re-record as much of this as I can. And I say as much as I can because another thing happened. I get all the way to the end. I do know that the program worked. However, there was a problem with the LEDs, so the LEDs don't light up. I was able to verify with another set of LEDs that they light up properly. So that I know the code works, I know the Arduino works, I just have a problem with the LEDs. And my boss, Leon, is gracious enough to do some troubleshooting on that to try to fix it. But unfortunately, that means it's going to be a little while before I can actually finish this project, this part of the project, and get them installed. But I still want to show the code work that is needed for this. The next thing that we need to do is, since we are using a library, we need to make sure that we tell it to use the library. So we have to do these include statements. And so first thing we're going to do is we're going to include, uh, now you would include anything that you're actually going, any libraries that you're actually going to use. In this case, we're only using one library. So we're going to use the and include statement to include the fast LED library, and that instruction is fastled.h. And then we're going to have these define statements here. And what these are going to do is basically define some variables that we're going to be using. And these variables are going to allow us to basically um, find a single spot. If we ever have to change these values, find them in one spot, and we'll only have to change it once as opposed to changing it everywhere in the code. So one thing I do know is the number of LEDs, that's what this one is for, on our LED string is 52. So that's what we're going to put there. And then we're going to do our next one. And that is going to be data pin. And we know that we're going to be using data pin number 9. And then we're going to set our, we're going to define our color order. And the reason why we're going to do a color order is because these LED strings, normally you're going to know them as RGB. If you are familiar with the way like TVs and whatnot work, light, they always call it RGB, red, green, blue. But generally speaking, this model of LED strip, you have to change the order, RGB instead of or GRB instead of RGB. And once we get it connected and powered up, we can verify that order. And if we need to change it, we can change it here. We can change this order to RGB if need be. But from everything that I've seen, the order is correct with GRB. So we'll just leave it at that. The next thing that we're going to do is tell it what the chipset is for the LED string that we're using. So if we continue using the LED string that we had before, if I don't have to change it, it is going to be a WS2812B. That is basically the string model. And each LED string of this type, they all have their own different models. WS2812B is the most common, I think, that is used, or it's one of the most common ones. It's a fairly decently priced one and all that kind of stuff. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to set a brightness. And that way, this allows us to be able to set the brightness. We don't want it to be at max brightness. In fact, when I was troubleshooting before, I had it at 200. We're going to set it at 60. So 60, our values are going to be between 0 and 255. So we have a total of 256 possible settings or values that we can select. We're going to do 260 or 60, which is going to be about a quarter of the brightness. And we're going to do that because we don't want to possibly burn anything out. So we're going to do that. So the next thing we're going to do is the CRB LEDs. And so what this is actually going to tell us is this is going to give us what this is going to do is this is going to set up an array, and it's going to basically make an array of all of the LEDs. So essentially, if you think about the LEDs for this value, this array, it's going to it's going to basically give us 52 LEDs in here, and then that way we can actually program each LED separately by calling its array position. So if we have 52 LEDs in our array, if I want the center one, I would say call you know LED number 26, right? And then that's going to give me the center LED, and I can then go from there. So I can call the specific one by calling the number that it is within the array. So in that case, it's 0 through 51 for a total of 52 LEDs. Um, so that's essentially all of our setup stuff there. Um, or our kind of initial values or whatever. So the next thing we're going to do is we have to do this void setup. And so what we're going to do is we're going to call certain like predefined commands that the fast LED um, library has. And so what we're going to do is we're going to basically add our LEDs to our basically our program, right? So we're going to tell it to use these LEDs. So what we need to do is we need to put in certain parameters, and so we're going to tell it to use this chipset, and we're going to tell it to use this data pin and this color order, and then we're going to tell it what we want to use. So we're going to use the LEDs. So we're going to use our um, we're going to use the array that we created, this LEDs array up here. So we're going to use the LEDs, and then we're going to tell it which LEDs we want to use. So as part of the setup, what we want to do is use all of the LEDs, right? And then later on, at certain intervals or whatever command, we might need to call out a specific LED. But to set it up, we want to make sure that we're telling it to use all the LEDs when we're doing this. So next, we're going to uh, do a set brightness. And this is basically going to set the brightness of the LEDs that we're going to be using. And that's why we have this value for brightness. Each of these commands, any of these actual commands up here, that we're just defining values. But once we actually create things or actually putting in code, any actual code that follows a command, we need to put in this semicolon at the end. And we need to make sure that we say brightness, not rightness. And I'm having a bit of a problem with, I'm used to using an IED, which is what this is. I'm used to using an IED that does like an autocomplete. So as you start typing something that it's familiar with or it knows is there, you can just do a tab, and it will complete it if it's in a list. And all of these should be in a list because we're using that library, but they're not there. So it's kind of something I'm not 100% used to. It's kind of annoying. So what we're going to do is this loop is where we're actually going to run our program. And so what we're going to do initially, so when we test this, what we want to do is actually be able to um, basically test and verify that the LEDs are working. And this is how I knew that the LEDs were working, is because I did this test first. So basically what's going to happen is um, initially I'm going to have this test, and this test is going to, I'm just going to try to simplify my life here. So I'm going to need 3 lines of this, and then I'm going to have LED 0, LED 1, and LED 2. Oops. The 2 needs to be in here. And so basically when we test this, this is just to verify that we are getting the color correct to where we want it. In the appropriate order and all that kind of stuff. So that's why we're setting up this part of the code. And then what we can do after we know that we have our order correct and that the LEDs are actually working, then we can actually get into the actual code. So so we do double slashes like this, and what that does is that tells it do not use the code or don't use any text that's after this and consider it code. So in this case, I'm just labeling that, it's acting as a label that says that this line is going to color that LED as red. Okay, and then we can go into RGB and we do our next one. And so we're going to do 0, 255, 0. Now, if you ever look at colors on a color wheel, there's a couple of different ways that they get labeled. And you can have hex numbers. You might see those are like 6-digit numbers, and it might be a combination of letters and numbers. Or they'll have, in this case, like a value 0 to 255. And 255 will be max brightness at that whatever that color is. So on the top one, this first value before the comma, that's for red, and then we're going to say 0 for green and 0 for blue. And this one is going to be 0 for red, 255 for green, and 0 for blue. So, and then we're going to do the same thing for this next one. We have to change this to a B because I can't type. Typing and talking is sometimes very difficult. I challenge you all to attempt it. And so this one is blue. The pen is blue. Anybody know that movie? All right, so the next thing that we need to do is for a fast LED, we need to have this command that is .show. And so basically what that does is that's going to actually tell it to run the command. So there's also a command called clear. And what we're going to do is we're going to go and put in a delay. And so what the delay will do is that allows us to see those light up in within a time period. So this is the code that I used, and I was actually able to test the second strand with it, but I didn't get it on video. But that was after hours and hours and hours of troubleshooting, verifying that everything was hooked up and working. I used my multimeter and I checked voltages all the way through the line between power coming in all the way to the LEDs, all those types of things. So everything looked like it was working, and I used that second set and actually verified that they lit up. So I do know that the code works. I do know that the chip works, but unfortunately, I can't show you that until I actually get those LEDs fixed. So up here we did a fast LED clear, and so I don't understand exactly what the clear does, but it basically just kind of clears it out, makes it ready to be able to run the loop. So we do the clear up here, then we do the show down here, and that's what tells it to actually show those things. And so right now we're not necessarily using the delay, but I think what it's going to do is it's going to come down here, light all these up, run the delay for 100 milliseconds, and then it's going to start over and run it again. So there you go. That's everything that goes into the code. Now, once you get done, there's this button here, and you'll notice when I hover over that, it says upload over here. So it tells you what it's going to do. So that's the upload button. We can do this to verify that the code is good, or that also wants to save it. So we don't need to necessarily do that. And it's going to tell us, hey, you got a problem here. LED was not declared in the scope. That is because we said LEDS. So let's make sure we do that. And that is the array name, and we need to make sure we have the array name correct down here. So we'll do a verify again. We don't want to save it, and it should come through. It's going to tell us down here, compiling the sketch, which is what the Arduino IED calls them as a sketch, and it gets done. If it says done compiling, then you know your sketch is good. It may not do what you want it to do because you didn't actually tell it properly on how to do what you want it to do, but at the very least, the code checks out and it is good code. And I did air quotes there. So all of this works. Everything's good to go, but that doesn't change the fact that I can't show you any of that at the moment. Unfortunately, it's taken so much time this week for me to get to the point where I understood exactly what the problem was and uh, potentially what the solution is going to have to be. I don't have anything else that I'm going to have in this video. The only thing you're going to get to see is me writing this code. So at the very least, you'll be able to see a very simple code that you can send to, if you have an Arduino and a string of WS2812B LEDs, you can send this code to it and it will light up the LEDs, the first three LEDs. It'll light them up as red, green, and blue, provided that that's the right order. All right. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for watching. I wish I could show you more. Next time, hopefully, we'll have more for you. May the force be with you always.